Hey, everybody, welcome back to the podcast. You're listening to the longest running superhero role playing game on Earth, also known as the Continuum Chronicles. As always, I'm your host, Chris Kent, the Game Master, GM for short. And as of me recording this, I just got home in a tow truck. My wife and I got a flat tire and had a lot of time to kill, so we played some DC Heroes in the car while we waited on the tow truck guy to arrive. Years ago, I put two 10-sided dice into one of those Pop-O-Matic bubbles, and we've kept that in the car for years so that we could play on road trips and stuff like that. So that came in really handy today. The other thing I wanted to say before we really dive into this is that what we do in our game with Wonder Woman might confuse some listeners. I often mention that I began this campaign in the summer of 1985. And what people might not realize is that Linda Carter's Wonder Woman TV show was still on TV in reruns at the time. So this game has been around for so long that Linda Carter was still current when we started. So that said, the TV show had a huge effect on the decisions and interpretations that went into our continuity. In fact, my earliest memory is watching the Linda Carter TV show as a little kid in the 1970s. That and Super Friends, which was a cartoon on TV in the 1970s, and Wonder Woman was on that too. And all of this stuff, by the way, is pre-crisis, right? And I think a lot of listeners are only familiar with the post-crisis take on Wonder Woman. And so maybe some folks then don't realize how many different takes DC had on what her powers were, what was her origin. It's changed a lot over the years. I'm a huge Wonder Woman fan, and then the other thing I want to say is that nothing I ever do with her is meant as disrespect. Our adult Wonder Woman, for instance, people think she's weird, but what's going on there is she acts the way she acted when she was created in the 1940s by a guy named William Moulton Marston, who, by the way, for those who are unaware, the guy basically had two wives, right? So the stuff he was into in real life, he would put that into the comic books. So Diana in the 40s didn't really act like, for instance, she did on the Linda Carter TV show. You know what I mean? And for her youth, we were looking at a run of comic books between Wonder Woman Volume 1, number 124, and Wonder Woman Volume 1, number 200. And that run tells a lot of stories about, they call her Wonder Tot, which I think is kind of a funny name, but it's just stories about Diana when she was extremely young. And like I started to say earlier, we borrow a lot from the Linda Carter show. And things like her being born in the year 550 BC, to the idea that the powers come from the costume. And if she not to be crass or whatever, but like if she was in the shower, she would have no powers. You know what I mean? Um, we also extrapolated that if her lasso makes stock 1970s electronic computerized beeping sounds, then it must be sufficiently advanced technology that is indistinguishable from magic, just like Arthur C. Clarke used to say. So I feel like that's probably what you need to know going into this. Um, Also, this is a time travel story. I'm just going to put all my cards on the table. I completely ripped off the plot of the first Terminator movie. So some of the time travel stuff might be confusing. As always, if you guys have any questions about anything, just let me know, and I'll be happy to explain it. I will do my best, though, to explain it now as we do today's video. So all that said, let's do today's video. So the prologue to this one takes place around 550 BC. And at that time, Rome was ruled by a monarchy rather than an emperor. The seventh and final king of Rome was Lucius Tarquinius Superbus, also known as Tarquin the Proud. His son was Sextus Tarquinius, and he held the title of prince. Prince Sextus Tarquinius was the lover of a beautiful woman named Hippolyta. And Hippolyta was pregnant with his children. And yes, that is plural, and we're going to kind of put a pin in that, okay? We're going to return to that later, but not in today's game. But at any rate, so she didn't know she was pregnant yet when the prince's father, the king, was overthrown. And he was overthrown so that it would lead to the establishment of the Roman Republic. So at any rate, the prince sets sail in a boat and goes missing. Shortly after that, his father, the king, was assassinated. If Sextus Tarquinius was alive, then he was the rightful king of Rome, and that would make Hippolyta his queen. So Queen Hippolyta of Rome gives birth to 3 kids, okay? And this part of the story is honestly kind of ripped off from Star Wars, where Padme gives birth to Luke and Leia, and then she sends Luke to grow up on Tatooine with one family, and she sends Leia elsewhere to grow up with a different family, right? And they're trying to hide the kids from Darth Vader, right? Everybody's on the same page so far? So the only baby that Hippolyta is going to try to raise by herself is Diana. She's the focus of today's game. There is a little girl who has dark skin, and her name is Nubia. And she, is taken elsewhere to be raised in secret, far away from would-be assassins, right? All of this, by the way, comes out of love. Hippolyta loves all 3 kids and wants all 3 kids to grow up and be safe and sound. The third baby, by the way, is a boy named Jason. And again, he is sent elsewhere. There's actually one of the Argonauts, and this is not that Jason. Jason and the Argonauts has already happened in the past, okay? So when Hippolyta has a son, she names him after the famous Jason of Jason and the Argonauts. But that said, one of the Argonauts is still alive, and so Jason is given him to raise, right? Okay. So I think you get the idea there. Again, if you have any questions, let me know. At any rate, so now we get into the main plot of this game session. 3 years pass, and young Diana is swimming in the Mediterranean Sea with a friend of hers named Mono. And his title, or whatever you want to call it, is Mermite. Kind of like, if you're familiar with a DC character called Batmite. Batmite is kind of like Batman's answer to Mr. Mxyzptlk, right? Mermite is he's a merman, right? The females of the race are called mermaids. So they've got the green tail and all that. but he's the same age as Diana. They're both 3-year-olds. So at any rate, they're playing in the water together, and Hippolyta is watching them from the shore when all of a sudden a time machine appears. And like, my wife was confused by the time machine. Imagine if the Germans in World War II built their own TARDIS, basically, right? And instead of being shaped like a phone booth, it's like wider on bottom and kind of round on top. So generally speaking, think of the shape of a bell. Its name in German is literally just the bell. But at any rate, so this time machine appears on the beach, and it has a door on it, and the door opens, and out steps a villain named Degaton. And he's got red hair, and he's wearing a black, the uniform of a soldier from the 1940s, right? And he pulls this little box out of his pocket, kind of like what you would have like an engagement ring in. It's that size of a box. And he opens it, and the box is lead, and it contains X kryptonite. And for those who don't know, X kryptonite can be green, yellow, or orange. This piece happens to be green. And it's famous for granting the attributes and powers of Kryptonians to non-Kryptonians. So, for instance, Supergirl gave some to her cat, and her cat became Streaky the Super Cat, right? And there's been various human girls who have been exposed to it, and they became, a Supergirl and stuff like that. So, at any rate, the villain exposes himself to this stuff. And like its more famous counterpart, red kryptonite, the effects of X kryptonite only last for a while, and then they wear off. So because of that, Degaton wanted to make sure he started the clock now at the beginning of the fight. And his plan, which I kind of glossed over earlier, is really, we're ripping off the plot of Terminator, right? Terminator 2, I guess, specifically, where if you can take out young John Connor, the future is going to go a lot easier for the bad guy, right? Same idea. Degaton wants to terminate Wonder Tot now so that she can't get older and be a problem. Because in World War II, Wonder Woman is a powerful opponent who has beaten this guy down lots of times. So, okay, so that said, Wonder Tot is very intelligent, partially in thanks to Athena of the Eternals, who paid a visit to Hippolyta when Diana was born. And so, at any rate, despite being just a toddler, Diana's a genius. So she tries to get close enough to Degaton that she can try to pickpocket the little lead box that has the X kryptonite in it, right? Because Wonder Tot doesn't have a costume yet, by the way. I should mention that. So therefore, she doesn't actually have powers, right? So she tries to fast talk the villain. And she holds her arms out to him, and she goes, "Daddy," hoping that he'll fall for it. And my wife explained that her plan was to try to get this guy to think, oh, she could be a really powerful member of our army in the 1940s, and maybe I will take her and raise her as my own, and da 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 da. But then, kind of a Trojan horse thing, ironically, then she will steal the X kryptonite, and then she'll have powers, and when he doesn't have powers, she'll defeat him, and da da da. That's the plan at this point. So my wife gets out the Pop-O-Matic bubble that we keep in the car that has 2d10 in it, and she shakes it, and she rolls like a 1 and a 2. Horrible role for those unfamiliar. Um, so she fails. And so then it's Degaton's turn, and his eyes glow red because he's charging up his heat vision, and he blasts, right? So then we go to the 30th century, and this is maybe going to start to confuse some people. So I'm going to do my best to not confuse you. In the 30th century, there is a group of teenage superheroes called the Legion of Superheroes. And the whole deal with the Legion, I mean, not their whole deal, but a thing that comes up a lot in the Legion of Superheroes is, for instance, Superboy is a member of the Legion. So the Legion have time machines that are basically a sphere, a more elegant and advanced version of the German bell that I mentioned earlier. But at any rate, these time bubbles can go back to earlier eras. And so when Clark Kent was growing up in Smallville and he was just Superboy, he wasn't Superman yet, they would basically abduct him and take him to the future because they needed him for some reason. They needed him to beat some villain in the future that they were unable to deal with otherwise. And certain other famous DC characters were likewise taken from when they were teenagers uh, for the same reason, right? And so the point is that in the 30th century, then we have a Wonder Girl who is actually teenage Diana, right? Um, not Donna Troy. I know that's going to confuse some people. And Diana was Wonder Girl at this point in that comic book run, by the way. At any rate, so we've got Superboy as Clark Kent, Wonder Girl is Diana Prince. They're in the 30th century for the time being, right? And so when changes in the timeline are happening, and we run it where it's a little like, in Back to the Future when Marty changes something and his older brother is the first one to kind of cease to exist. You know what I mean? Like there's an order of things. You know what I mean? So one of the guys in the Legion is named Brainiac 5, and Brainiac 5 is kind of like the descendant of the villain known as Brainiac. Brainiac 5 is like a teenage boy who is a hero and not a bad guy. And he's their resident science guy. And so Brainiac 5 kind of figures out what's happening with time, and he explains it to Superboy and Wonder Girl. And so okay, so I need to mention another thing. Because this Superboy is the pre-crisis Superboy, right? He can fly insanely fast, right? Like way faster than the speed of light. So something they did with Superboy in the pre-crisis era was he could fly faster than the quote unquote time barrier, and he could just fly back and forth from his era, which is the 20th century, to the Legion's era, which is 1,000 years later, right? It was barely an inconvenience. So when he hears what's going on in the past, he scoops up Wonder Girl and he flies her back in time to the moment when Degaton was doing his Terminator impression. So just as Degaton's eyes start to glow and he prepares to fire a blast of heat vision, Superboy and Wonder Girl appear. And the teenage Diana gets between the villain and her younger counterpart, who is Wonder Tot. And the teenage Diana blocks using her one of her bracelets, right? So she stops the energy blast from hitting her younger self. And Diana says, "Not so fast, Degaton." Wonder Tot is shocked to see her older self. as is Hippolyta, and also Mermite, who who is the 3-year-old male mermaid that's here, right? He was in love with Wonder Tot. When he sees Wonder Girl and sees what she's going to turn out like, right? He's even more in love now. Her Degaton is also shocked that Wonder Girl is here, but his plan hasn't changed. He still thinks if he can take out the youngest one, any future iteration of that character will be erased. So that's his plan. And so on his turn, he declares that he's going to take another shot. Superboy is faster though in initiative, so he targets Predegaton with his own heat vision. And we roll the dice, get a good roll. Superboy hits him, does a little bit of damage, but not much. Predegaton then lunges at Superboy, punching him. And while they both have Kryptonian powers, Predegaton is a grown man and Superboy is a kid, right? So it's not a fair fight, is the point. Wonder Girl then tries to lasso Predegaton with her golden lasso. Again, we roll the dice. Again, it's a low roll, so she misses. Predegaton beats Superboy until he's knocked out, and then he does the same to Wonder Girl. So that's when Superman and Wonder Woman show up, and they have come here from the 1940s. So they attack Predegaton, who they are very familiar with who Predegaton is, right? Superboy had already softened up the villain a little bit for him. So the two of them finish the job. They just punch Degaton until he is knocked out. So Hippolyta runs up to Wonder Woman and is in awe of who her daughter is going to grow up to become. Because remember, Hippolyta has never met Wonder Woman, right? And for that matter, she's never met Wonder Girl, who is sort of like waking up right about now. So they all the Wonder characters all hug, you know. And Wonder Woman says to young Hippolyta, and she's not used to a Hippolyta that's this young. She says, "It's good to see you, Mother." And Hippolyta cries and talks about, oh my God, look how beautiful you are. Look at the woman you've grown up to be, so on and so forth. Diana, on her end, is surprised because again, I'm really, really, really ripping off Terminator, right? So think of how at the beginning of the first movie, Sarah Connor is a waitress and she's kind of a girly girl, right? Um, at that point, all she knows is like she's going to go clubbing with her friends that night and stuff like that. You know what I mean? So you got to think from the perspective of Kyle Reese. What has he been told about Sarah Connor over the years? Like, oh, she's this unstoppable force that knows everything about guns, and she taught John everything he knows, and da 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 da, and she's just like hardcore, right? So imagine Kyle Reese goes back in time and he meets the waitress. Not what he expected, probably. You know what I mean? So likewise, Diana is kind of blown away by what her mom is like at this age. And so at any rate, Diana tells Hippolyta that because Hippolyta has all these compliments for her, basically. And Diana says, I'm the woman I am today because of you, mother. And, there's more tears and stuff. And Hippolyta says, like, I don't even know how to raise kids. Like, I don't know what I'm doing. And Diana gives her a wide smile and promises her, you figure it out. And so then Hippolyta asks how she even knew to come here. And so Diana explains, like, because these are my memories, right? Like, I remember being Wonder Tot. I remember when I was Wonder Girl, I was a member of the Legion of Superheroes, stuff like that. So therefore, and Superman remembers being Superboy too, So they knew, because they remembered meeting their older selves and stuff. They knew it was basically their destiny to come here today. And at any rate, Wonder Woman then uh, tells Wonder Tot that there's something else she remembers about this day. And with that, Wonder Woman gives Wonder Tot her own costume. So now Wonder Tot has superpowers and is immediately a handful. And Hippolyta is less than thrilled that she will now have to care for a superpowered toddler. Superman smiles. And with Superman, by the way, we lean really into Christopher Reeve, of course, who was also current when the game started. So Superman smiles and he says that his adoptive parents felt the same way when they had to raise a super baby, which, again, for those who don't know, pre-crisis, yes, there was Super Baby, Superboy, Superman. That's Wonder Tot, Wonder Girl, Wonder Woman. So Wonder Tot asks if she can meet Super Baby, and Superman assures her that she does because he remembers that the two of them used to play together as children. So then we get into the epilogue of today's game. Superboy takes the ex-kryptonite with him because he has, in the basement of the Kent's farmhouse, he has kind of, he's calling it a fortress of solitude is probably too much, but sort of the things you wouldn't one day find in the fortress, Superboy has kind of like a scaled down version of all that stuff. And so he has a kryptonite collection that is safely contained in such a way it can't hurt him or anybody else. So he takes the ex kryptonite to put in that. And Superboy and Wonder Girl return to their respective decades. And by the way, they were teenagers in different decades. So yeah, just throwing that out there. Superman and Wonder Woman tie up Degaton and the golden lasso of truth, and they take him back to the 1940s where they came from. But Die Glock, the German time machine, is still here, right? So once Wonder Tot figures out how her new powers work that her costume gives her, she uses the time machine to visit Super Baby. Hippolyta meets Ma and Pa Kent in Smallville, and they forge a bond over the challenges presented by raising such powerful children. Wonder Tot also visits Wonder Girl and Wonder Woman a lot. Like in the comic book run I mentioned, that's all she ever does. All Wonder Tot like ever does practically is she wants to go hang out with her older selves. And then the three of them have these adventures together. And that, by the way, is the reason I did a time travel adventure where we used the bell and all that. At any rate, that's a story for another time. And that was it for today's game session. We had a good time playing it. I hope that you had a good time listening to it? If so, smash that like button, make sure you're subscribed, ring the bell for notifications, and be sure to leave us a comment. That said, take care, and we'll see you in the next video. Bye.